Every last one of them.
After more than 40 hours of riding this meteorite collision course of two passionate yet revengeful women, The Last of Us Part 2 has redefined what it means to become interactively engaged.
Ellie!
Throughout this journey, my mind, emotions, and will were all on full display, as I often found myself dealing with self on a psychological level, unlike any game before it. At its explosive conclusion, I even questioned whether this experience could be classified as a mere video game, because its realization was so much more. The Last of Us Part 2 is unlike anything we have ever played, and frankly, one of the greatest video game achievements of all time.
So they just get away with this?
How'd you find us?
You can't stop this.
Based on the conclusive measures taken by Joel in the original game, in his successful attempt to rescue Ellie, who has willingly decided her potential sacrifice was necessary for the greater good, sets off a destructive chain reaction that will ultimately lay waste to many lives. Though Joel has only the best intentions as a loving would-be father to Ellie, an orphan of sorts, his good intentions fuel unapologetic rage for the game's two powerful protagonists.
I have to finish it.
It is one thing to kill in the name of survival against the game's more unsavory, mutated, and monstrous enemy types. However, throughout this visceral death trail of carnage as Ellie, the idea of by any means necessary takes on a whole new meaning. Interestingly, for the majority of the ride, you are more than satisfied by Ellie's resolve due to her life-altering and shocking experience of being held against her will and forced to watch, as the only person who has only and abundantly loved her is helplessly and mercilessly beaten to death. Due to this traumatic encounter, though it is not directly mentioned in the game, Ellie suffers from what seems like an acute case of PTSD, as her quiet moments seem to be forever haunted by these actions. Her only solace: destroy that which has caused her so much pain and loss. Killing in the name of revenge has a callous way of rationalizing what could be considered irrational behavior. Yet the ever-present hurt and emptiness within needs to be fed. So, with every step closer to her ultimate goal, Ellie, or you the player, begin justifying your actions. Despite the brutality, developer Naughty Dog truly integrates the killing of mutated enemies with human enemies, and before you know it, anyone who stands in your way or not complicit with your demands, regardless of their reasoning, comes to an awful end, often laying in their own blood as Ellie continues on her warpath. Adding a large dose of humanity to the affair, players will hear of their victims agonizing in excruciating pain, even call out to their loved ones in anguish, as well as plead for the pain to stop just before going silent. Not until the game flips the narrative upside down, offering the other side of the coin, do you, the player, fully grasp the gravity of your actions in the name of justified revenge. In between the killing, The Last of Us Part 2 engrosses the player in true-to-life people interactions, which throughout maintains an organic manifestation of real concerns and reasoning. In this way, players discover many truths of the people within this world. Very few are hell-bent on seeing it burn. Some simply are taking orders to maintain peace, while some are protecting their loved ones and reasonable self-interests, with ultimately everyone just trying to survive. And regardless of what side many of these people find themselves on, after a while, you may find yourself wanting the killing to just simply stop. This becomes quite evident when the game places the player in the shoes of Abby. As much as I wanted to share in Ellie's gratification and purpose, upon discovering the other side, Abby's reality, my heart gradually began to betray some of my previous actions. This inner turmoil was truly incredible. With almost every interaction with people who would eventually become my victims at the hands of Ellie, I could feel myself emotionally changing, wishing there was another way to find peace for Ellie. The mind trip here walks with you the more you learn about the people in the world, their hopes and dreams of a better life. You grow fond of the enemy because in every sense of who they are you. Just regular people with flaws and imperfections. The story of The Last of Us Part 2 is an emotional awakening, one layered with the base of our human nature to love and to survive at any cost, among other humanly thrilling and humanly flawed nuances, making up this breathtaking narrative. The pacing of the game is staged against real-life interactions with every conversation carrying significant weight, with some foreshadowing dangling in the back of your mind in anticipation, most of which does not disappoint. Similar to your journey with Joel and Ellie in the original game, completing objectives here is more or less the same, with a system that worked well before, now just better, staged with a noticeable overhaul of mechanics and combat interaction. For most of the ride, you will find yourself scrutinizing as many empty buildings and areas as possible to acquire tools to enhance the functionality of your weapons, among other valuables to enhance your player's physical dexterity and abilities against the game's more challenging foes, offering various difficulty modes such as very light, moderate, hard, and survival. The different difficulties are maintained by offering fewer and fewer resources with tougher enemies the harder the difficulty. This time around, while the gameplay mechanics are simple in scope with intuitive controls, gunplay offers a comfortable experience, even if you might find yourself seldomly squeezing off a few rounds due to how scarce bullets can be on the harder difficulties. From performing stealth kills, taking out enemies with your silenced pistol, or optioning for the quiet but deadly bow, eventually you will have to get up close and personal and get your hands dirty. Clearing out buildings never gets old, as the atmosphere is always haunting with dread and despair. In a way of breaking up the monotony of your collecting of resources, there are well-placed letters with sometimes valuable intel of safe combinations offering even more valuable items. Even when your plan of going stealth is compromised and all hell breaks loose, the measures taken to survive are frantic, forcing you to stay poised as you desperately fight, push, heal, run, reposition yourself, and stand your ground. Again, it never gets old, and it is all always quite exciting. As you play through this dilapidated world, you discover that Naughty Dog has once again managed to create that which is ugly and ruined to be more than stunning. The Last of Us Part 2 is a horrific reality, however, one that is distinctly portrayed throughout the game's beautifully graphical canvas. Upon entering Seattle, the pronounced lush greenery is simply striking. Even draw distances maintain intricate cityscape details. Not to give away too much of the actual game, however, there was a scene as playing with Abby when you're walking across the skyline that the clouds begin to clear and you realize just how insanely high you are. And of course, though I'm playing the game comfortably in my home, I was still unnerved by the sheer scope of details and height depth perception. It was nothing short of incredible. Going from one environment to the next, there was always something that visually drew you in. The lighting, I must say, bordered on ridiculousness. Everywhere you looked, the setting felt accurately dreadful, yet the technical convictions to achieve this seemed remarkable. While there is so much that can be said about the game, this review does leave out much in the way of story specifics, like details on important characters, enemy types, and intricate plots and outcomes. Please note that this is done on purpose. The Last of Us Part 2 must be fully experienced with fresh eyes and an open mind. Before the launch of The Last of Us Part 2, I personally was asked whether I believed Naughty Dog could offer a sequel that could surpass the original. My reply, maybe. But I followed up by stating that the original was a perfect game, so in that regard, probably not. But I would be more than satisfied with something that comes very close to the original game. Well, to my surprise and disbelief, The Last of Us Part 2 doesn't come close. It surpasses the original in every way. What is on showcase from start to this epic conclusion is extraordinary. This riveting narrative of loss and hope is punctuated by an intoxicating world of despair. One minute I was cheering for Ellie, the next for Abby. Yet despite my feelings of guilt and rationale, ultimately I simply wanted peace for both of them. In conclusion, The Last of Us Part 2 is one of the best video games I have ever played. Period. And there you have it.